Hello and welcome everybody to episode 3 of Workbook. My name's Tyson Seburn and I'm here with my
And
co-host.
I'm Taylor Veigga.
Uh,
Episode 3 already. Can you believe it?
well, a little bit because we worked so hard on the first two.
Oh, you especially because you had to edit them. So
But I loved every minute of it. It's my new superpower, which is editing out ums and ahs and pauses. So here today and for the rest of the season, we're going to be focusing on individuals, whereas in the last two episodes, if you just listened to them, we focused more on a topic, which was
I guess it was coming out.
yes, that's right. And now we heard from each of the 9 ELT queer people when they shared what their coming out stories were, and those were incredible things to listen to in the last episode, I think. And now we're going to shift to listening to each one of them one by one by one. And we're going to hear their story from start to finish with very few edits because we don't want to blame it on the edit. Next up in RuPaul's Drag Race podcast. We're going to talk about the next queen, which is Chad Langford.
I love you. I want to marry Chad and we could have a beautiful lavender marriage.
Well, we'll see if he's up for it because he's not married.
You see?
Yeah. Okay, anywho, Chad lives in the north of France. He said he lived in Lille, which I've heard of that place. But then he mentioned that actually he lived sort of outside of Lille in a place called Rubax. I can't be Rubax because it's French, right? Ube, maybe? Ube. That sounds familiar. It's Roubaix. How would you say that?
Rubo, but then I'm like kind of mixing so many different accents.
Well, I think
I don't
Roubaix would be
know.
like EAU at the end.
You see, I don't speak French. So now our listeners know. Thank you, Seth. Just spoiled the fantasy.
Well, obviously I speak fluent French, that's why I'm questioning. Anyway, let's hear from the horse's mouth, shall we?
Yeah, my name is Chad. I am American, but I have lived in France for the past 30 years, approximately.
Wow.
And I am a language teacher. I used to teach French for many years when I was in the United States, but then I sort of refashioned myself into an English teacher when I moved to France. And I also teach some Dutch classes, but that's an ancillary activity. But I like to say now that I'm a language teacher because I actually have taught more than my native language. But I'm basically a language teacher, and I work at a university, a big public university in France, with all of the conveniences and inconveniences that involves. And I'm 57. Did I say that? I'm 57 years old. I live in the north of France, and the easy answer is that I live in Lille because that's a big metropolitan center in the north of France. But I actually live in a town right outside of Lille called Roubaix. Roubaix, and Roubaix is a working class city with lots of immigrants and a very high level of unemployment. And I love living here. I love it here. I've been here now for about getting close to 20 years, I think, that I've lived in this city. And it's very close to Lille, which is a much more cosmopolitan place. I shouldn't say cosmopolitan. Roubaix is very cosmopolitan. It has a huge mix of people, but it's cooler, trendier place to live, I think, in certain senses in Lille. But it's only a 20-minute metro ride.
Okay, that's not too far. So in terms of queerness, what terms do you use to describe yourself?
Well, queer, more and more. I'm comfortable with that term, and I think it suits me very well because I think it covers a lot of territory, and I like that. I think it's a more inclusive term,
Mm.
and I am, even though I'm 57, I'm not of the generation that has trouble with that term. That was never a term. That was never an insult. The insult in my generation was faggot. I
Mm.
don't have exactly the same relationship with that word as I do with queer. So even though when I hear people complain about it, who are usually people older than me, I
Mm.
don't. I sometimes judge them and say, but no, it's great to be able to say you're queer. But I sort of get it because if they feel the same way about that term as I feel about faggot, I guess I see where they're coming from. But for me, I like it. I like how the word has been re-owned. I feel a lot of affinities with the people on that whole string of letters that we now use. I like that. I guess gay was a word that I used to qualify myself for a very long time.
Mm.
And I don't have a problem with that. I think of myself more as queer because I like the inclusiveness of it, and I like the fact that it means I don't really have to feel that there's some of the codes that are really gay men codes from the 1980s, 90s, and early 2000s that I don't necessarily identify with.
You mentioned that the faggot was a slur to you, and I'm sure most of us actually. Who said that to you, or why did you feel that way, or in what way was it used in relation to you?
Well, it was used as an insult. It was used as intimidation. It was used by mostly by people my age at school.
Mm.
I have to say too, it's not like it's an everyday thing. I don't feel like every day of my life growing up as a young child, I feared that or heard those words, but I did hear them. And I was kind of a sissy boy. I didn't play sports. I wanted to read books. I liked to put on plays and to play the piano. I liked hanging out with girls more than I liked just those kind of stereotypical things, which certainly don't apply to everyone in our community. But
Mhm.
I was very transparent. Not what wasn't trying to be transparent, but I wasn't fooling anyone.
Mm.
I was not a butch kid, and I didn't like sports and I didn't like sweating. I didn't like PE class. Well, there are certain aspects of PE class, I suppose I
Mm.
when everybody was getting changed and getting ready to go into the showers.
Yeah, that made
But
me very nervous. Yeah.
but made me very nervous too. Made me very nervous too. But so I don't think that it wasn't something that really surprised me. It's like, well, yeah, they're calling me that because they know. They know. The thing is, I've thought about this a lot. Did they really know? Because that was also just an insult to give anyone. You didn't have to be, people didn't have to suspect that you were gay to call you that. That was a very handy
Well,
insult.
I guess the litmus test would be whether they called other boys that.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't listening. I was really just had my, self-centered thinking about what people were calling me. But in any case, I think that in many cases I was identified as the faggot of, fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade. By the time you got to high school, no one really cared. I had different kinds of angst in high school because that's when you really, the testosterone really starts pumping when you get to that age, and
Mm.
questions of sexuality and what you want and what you want to do and how you experiment. That was a different kind of sort of struggle. But as far as being insulted and being afraid that somebody was going to discover something, by the time I got to high school, I did not care. But as a kid, I didn't want people to know.
When I grew up, queer was a very common slur. And so it is potentially more regional, I think, than solely age, although there's an intersection between those two things, obviously. And it took me a while to unlearn the power that it had over me from a negative perspective and reclaim it myself. And so I think it is possible for anybody to do that. It depends on, what your motivation is. And my motivation really was to be as broad and inclusive as possible. If I'm going to talk the talk and I'm going to walk the walk. So, what's your relationship to those words?
Good question. Because the word faggot, it was like when I was growing up, it was not just a slur, it was like really bad word that I wouldn't normally dare say. So,
Hmm.
and I think with the word queer, I think I'm from a generation that has already given a new meaning to that word. So I've never associated the word queer with something negative.
Mm.
And of course, it's become more popular
Mm-hmm.
in recent years. But yeah, so I think my relationship with those words is pretty different from Chad's and maybe even yours.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think I identify with Chad quite specifically, actually. I think we experience the same feelings. With queer, just like Chad talked about, there's been a reclamation by the queer community itself to pull the word back and take away its power, right? Certainly the power of negativity. And I think that's been successful for the most part. Even though I come across older people than myself who have mentioned to me that they feel excluded when we use the word queer to describe this podcast or a couple or something like that. And
Interesting.
yeah,
What do you feel they would feel included by? Like what sort of word would make them feel like a part of this?
I think they're just going for like the very specific identity, like gay or lesbian. But for me, I like the word queer. I really, it made me feel uncomfortable for a long time. But after I started just, like anything, just saying it over and over again, you sort of desensitize to that negativity, and then you start to find out what parts of it are really great. So
I think I like the fact that it's an umbrella term
yeah,
that could potentially mean so many different things. So I think that's where the appeal is to me.
and Chad really makes a good point about this, actually.
I just really want to express solidarity with the trans community, but I do feel that there's a lot of trans bashing within the gay community. It's like this, they're not us, we're not them. Why are we all being put into the same basket? And I'm very uncomfortable with that sort of discourse. I don't mind being put in that category.
Yeah, exactly. And not even don't mind, I welcome it, right? Because, we are just a community and need to support each other. And so, yeah, I recognize there is I would like to call it a fraction of the gay community that feels this way, because they're trying to separate themselves from a target group right now, right? An easy way to do that is to become the oppressor, because then you identify with other oppressors and then you're not oppressed by those oppressors. Obviously, I don't feel that way. Were there terms like this in Brazilian Portuguese, or were you familiar with using these English words, actually?
I was familiar with the English words. In Brazilian, certainly there were equivalents in Portuguese, but I'm trying to think of some at least. I can't. I don't think I can remember any.
So you obviously weren't the recipient of these negative words in Portuguese.
I think I was called different things.
Oh my God, they said so many things. Like,
you're perfect, you're beautiful, you look like Linda Evangelista, you're a model.
Amazing.
No, I wasn't always called good things. Definitely not.
I was called Sissy, Fruit Fairy.
Fairy is very cute.
It's not when you're a little boy trying to not be that. Next, he talked about growing up in Peoria and how he felt. I was talking about what did you think of your city? Was it like a racist, awful city? And he was like, no, it was neutral. That's how he felt about it.
That really called my attention.
Yeah, because it wasn't my experience of my city at all. And I had sort of the feeling like he and I grew up in sort of similarly sized cities, but maybe not. One of the features, and this actually might be something I just don't know about my own city, but he said that there were places where, if you were in the know at least, like his friend Barbara, who was a fag hag, there's the word, I guess I've reclaimed it, or a beard in today's terms maybe. She tended to know where all the gays hung out, and it was, and that's why she liked going there. And it made me wonder about my own places in my own town growing up. And I couldn't think of anything because I was under the impression that my town was horribly homophobic, as was every town in the late 80s and early 90s. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there were places to go. But
Maybe you were
certainly,
just not invited.
Oh.
I was like the gayest person anybody knew, so I'm not sure why that would be the case. But
So there you have it. Because you were closeted at the
oh,
time.
well, that's
So
probably true.
I grew up in the Midwest. I
Mhm.
grew up in Illinois, more specifically in central Illinois, in a city called Peoria,
Mm.
which was kind of just a very basic, banal city. I hated it when I shouldn't say that. I don't think I ever hated it. I like to say that I hated it, and I kind of felt, especially as an adolescent, as a teenager, I just want to get out of here.
Yeah.
And I was drawn to big meccas, and I felt like I was born in the wrong sort of city. Now I realize it was a very nice place to grow up, and
Mm.
it's kind of a boring city, but it is a city. You know,
Mm.
there are buildings in it, and there are,
Mhm.
there are people who live there, but it's just it's not a terribly interesting city, but it's a great place to grow up. When I think of queerness, and I'm one of those people who I identified who I was and what my place was in humanity, and especially in terms of my sexuality and the sort of person or people that I was interested in. I never remember figuring that out. I always knew it. You know how people
Mm.
sometimes, oh, it was after puberty, or even some people come to a realization, in their 20s or 30s. I always knew it. I always knew who I was. And when I think about where I was growing up, I think it's just kind of a neutral place. I don't think I grew up with some feelings of oppression and judgment that came from the world or from my country, but not necessarily in the city that I grew up in. I think it was just at that time there wasn't a whole lot going on. There wasn't, there weren't youth groups or, what's it called? They have the Gay Straight Alliance and that
Right.
sort of thing. That definitely didn't exist yet. I guess I've never thought about my experience and my coming to terms with who I was and being the person that I wanted to be and that I needed to be associated with the city that I grew up in. I don't think
Mm.
it would have been a whole lot different unless I had lived in a big city where maybe there was more exposure. But even when I was a kid, there was a gay bar in Peoria, Illinois. Maybe there were a couple, but there was one that people, knew of and sometimes spoke of
Mm.
in hushed tones, of
Mm.
course.
Mm.
When I was in high school, I wasn't really out yet, but I had a friend who liked to hang out with sort of fringe people in general. And the city I lived in had a big river, the Illinois River. And down by the river was a department store called Sears. And I remember overhearing her once when I was maybe 15 or 16 years old say that she used to like to go and hang out in the parking lot of Sears on a Friday and a Saturday night because that's where the gay people went to congregate. And she liked hanging out with the gay people. I remember thinking, oh God, I wish I had the courage to go to Sears parking lot on a Saturday night, or even to say to my friend, it's like, can I come with you sometime and see what that is? So that was, I wasn't 18 years old yet. I was still fairly young. This is still the 1980s.
Mhm.
So maybe it wasn't completely neutral. I don't know how Barbara was her name. I don't know how Barb knew. She just must have had more gaydar than I did. She knew that in on a Saturday night there were places to go.
It's also interesting that you still innately knew that you should be quiet or careful, or you felt you didn't have enough courage to ask your friend to go to these bars. Like that to me shows you had been taught that somewhere, right? That this was a shameful thing, or you had to be careful, or
Yeah, it would have been so easy to say to her, can I come with you to, I'm interested. At that age, I would have said I'm gay because I knew it. But I didn't ever cross my mind that this was obviously an ally.
Mhm.
It was an ally. Maybe she was even advertising.
Well, this is what I'm wondering, is maybe she knew and she was actually just giving you the door,
Yeah. Unfortunately, I did not walk through that door.
Yeah, I think there's probably multiple times where people like you or I could look back and maybe think someone had clocked us and were trying to give us a, a little push or, some help. And we just didn't take it because either we were oblivious or too scared that that isn't what they were actually doing and they were trying to catch you or something.
Yeah. There was a bookstore, a normal bookstore, not a bookstore, but a book emporium, it was called, in a small shopping center not far from where I lived. And in the corner of that bookstore where the magazines were, there were a ton of gay magazines. What were they called? Blue Boy and Honcho. And they were there, and I would sneak in there sometimes when I was a teenager and wait until many people in the bookstore so I could go back and maybe take a peek at what was in those magazines. I remember thinking, nobody buys these, but obviously people were buying them.
No kidding, right?
They wouldn't be stocked up. No bookstore.
How could anybody have the balls to go buy one of these things in that's sort of what ran through my mind even still.
Well, what they had these I can visualize it. Exactly where it was. It was high up. They didn't want kids to reach it. And it was behind other things. You had to know it was there.
Do you have knowledge of queer spaces when you were younger? Like that you had around you?
No, not at all. I lived in a horrible place.
Which was?
I lived in an island, and the island was very conservative. But there were the funk balls in Rio. And those spaces were, I'm not going to say those were queer spaces because they definitely weren't. But I would say that they were more inclusive spaces that you would see like more openly queer people like existing and dancing, but not like hooking up.
So there wasn't an alley or a pier, that you see in movies in different places. But there was a ball.
There was a ball. Yeah.
Voguing and stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't that kind of ball. It was like a funk.
It's like people wearing tiaras and stuff.
No. It were like,
what kind of goddamn ball was it then?
It's like with drug dealers and guns and
well, that doesn't sound like a ball at all.
Yeah.
Have you seen Cinderella? It's not like that.
And then it stopped going because of the guys with guns and
wow, what a seedy past you have.
It was a rough neighborhood.
The first queer space that I was aware of was not in my hometown actually, because I grew up in St. Thomas, which shout out to all the St. Thomas-ites around who are listening to this right now. But I went to university in London, and not the good one, but London, Ontario, which was probably 10 times as big as St. Thomas, so relatively big for my area. And at that time, there was a record store that I used to go to downtown called Dr. Disc, and we used to buy Madonna records there because they had lots of imports. But anyway, I digress. And next to it, or near it, was a gay bar, and it was sort of mentioned that this was a gay bar, though I never saw anybody go in or out of it. I was always sort of told that it was kind of a late night bar. So like you wouldn't go into it at 11 o'clock, for example. I mean, I guess why would you go to any bar when you're 20 at 11 o'clock?
What time would you go? Like
we always went after midnight because then there was no cover usually.
Okay.
But and that's when they started playing retro stuff. And the bars in Canada, last call was at 3, I think. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But so this was like a bar you would go after hours. And I always envisioned like it being kind of like gross for some reason, like dirty. And so I never actually did go to any place like that. But that was the only place, or the first place I had ever heard of that had gay people. And I think too, at that time I was really, as you may remember, sort of struggling with who I wanted to be or who I thought I was publicly. between gay and straight, at that point still didn't want to be identified by anybody as like potentially gay because I'd been fighting that my whole high school. You know, upon reflection, I mean, tell me if you agree or not, but upon reflection, it really wasn't just something they did to everybody. For me, it was like the way society had so little representation aside from, you know, any kind of queer character that might be the butt of a joke or something like that. That was the way that you were modeled to be treated. So
I agree with what you
yeah.
say, and I don't know how you feel about this, but when people say things like, "Oh, everybody was made fun of as a child. Everybody was," I'm sorry, that's just not true. I'm not saying that nobody was made fun of, or that everybody wasn't some of the time made fun of, but some people are singled out, and I was one of those people. I was always singled out as different and did not have very many friends, or sometimes at there are periods where I felt like I had no friends. And I just don't think it's true when people say, "Oh, everyone thinks that they weren't popular." I'm sorry, the popular kids knew they were popular. I think that's bullshit. I think that certain people are singled out, and I think that queer people, when I was growing up, were singled out by their peers.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we're in a time of being taught to gaslight ourselves and our feelings about something. So like you don't want to be the drama queen, or you don't want to make things bigger than it actually is. And so when someone now tells me everybody had their own shit to go through and you never know what people were going through and gay kids didn't necessarily have it worse than anybody else, I feel like we're expected to suppress our experience and say, oh, you're right, you know, being gay was just one of many things people were bullied about and everybody had their own thing, without really acknowledging that our experience in high school or school is really very traumatic and affected the rest of our lives. And so some people who were popular may have had, you know, difficult things going on too. But what do you think?
I agree. I think usually it was like way worse. But it's funny because I think two things can be true at the same time. Especially in high school, I think I was popular. I think I was very popular. And yet I was bullied. But there wasn't like physical violence or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that has to do with the fact that, number one, they looked at me and they saw a girl, and maybe for that reason there wasn't like anything physical. Number one, I don't know. There was also the belief that I was funny, and people thought I was funny for some reason. And I didn't think I was funny. I don't think I am funny.
So you weren't purposely trying to be the clown as a coping mechanism?
No, I'm really clumsy. That hasn't changed. But I wasn't trying too hard or anything. That's really, but you know, at the same time, let me tell you something. When it was graduation day, everybody in my class, they wanted me to be the host because there were like two hosts for the ceremony. Everybody wanted me to be the host, me and another girl. And as much as I felt tempted to, you know, be the host and participate in that ceremony, I was terrified because I knew that if I was there on stage, people would bully me in front of my parents. So I didn't even attend my graduation ceremony at high school. I think for them, it was just, you know, we're just making fun of each other. When for me, it wasn't. It was something that would make me very uncomfortable.
I feel kind of similar to you in some ways. I mean, because I felt unsafe sometimes and scared to be alone because there were certain people who would take that opportunity not to beat me up or anything. Like you, I got spared, if you want to call it that, any physical violence. That never happened to me.
No, that happened to me in like elementary school.
Oh, that sucks. The bottom line, back to Chad, is we did have it worse than some people. And
For sure.
to suggest that everybody's experience was of equal measure in terms of negativity is just plain wrong.
No, and it's gaslighting. I think that's what it is.
Yeah. How about coming out? Did you ever do like any kind of formal coming out, or has it been like a process, or was it just sort of expected?
It was, I think it was a process. It sounds funny now to say that I came out sort of officially. To me, the big thing is for me, it was my parents. My parents were not the first people that I came out to, but they were the most important people that I came out to. I always picked up, I was very fortunate to grow up in a household where it was made clear to me that I was loved unconditionally and there was never going to be any risk. A couple of times, I think I got a message from my parents, sort of like, you know, maybe they knew when they were sort of sending out some signals. Maybe I imagined that, but I didn't grow up in terror of being kicked out of my house if I told my parents. But I was still very comfortable and still very nervous about it. And it was important for me to be honest with them and to tell them. And I came out to my parents when I was officially, I mean, they knew a long time before I came out to them, but I came out to them officially when I was 19. And that seems kind of late now, where kids are coming out when they're, 11 or 12 years old to their parents. But at the time, that was still kind of young. I know a lot of people of my generation who were not telling their parents at 19 that they were gay.
I was 23.
You're 23. So that to me seems closer to the age when I think that, sort of post-university maybe was when more people did it. I had a friend, a girl who was our young woman, because actually she was about 7 years older than I was. But when I was in high school, she was a friend of mine. And I think she maybe had a crush on me. And I had a platonic crush on her. We got along very well, but I think that she was wondering why things weren't going anywhere in that direction. And we got into a heated conversation one night and were sort of upset sitting in a car in a parking lot. I must have been maybe 16 years old. And she said to me, "Are you gay?" And without missing a beat, I said, "Yes." Yes, yes, yes. I felt like, oh my God, I actually said it to someone. That was my first coming out to someone. I don't know if that counts because I was sort of backed into a corner and I knew that I shouldn't say back. She wasn't cool about it at all, but it was answering the question. It wasn't making a decision to tell someone that I was.
Do you remember growing up with any media representation of queerness that you saw? Like, was there any examples? I think we could probably have similar examples if we think about it.
Well, in entertainment, let me think. There wasn't that much. I can think of a couple examples that really stuck with me. What high school years?
Such as?
When I was in high school, right before I went to university, there was a telefilm called Consenting Adult. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
You have to look some of these. I will send you the reference. Consenting Adult was a telefilm, and it was about a young university boy who realizes that he can no longer deny his sexuality. And masculine athlete sort of boy who comes out to his parents and it does not go well with his father, I should say. So his mother, who is played by Marlo Thomas, is more excited, though she struggles with it. And Martin Sheen, who plays the father, rejects him and hates him and dies before they can reconcile. That was on television, and we had a VCR. So I kind of knew that it was going to be on. I'd seen, the commercials for it the week before. I was like, oh, I got to tape this. I gotta keep this as a record. And I taped it, and my God, the number of times I watched that, over and over again, feeling like, okay, there's some representation out there. There was a little bit of comfort, I think, in that. Is thinking like, oh, this is on TV. You don't have to go to it's not rated R. It's not something that you have to go to see at at the cinema. It's on TV. Anybody can watch this. And, it got some publicity and critical acclaim and all of that. So aside from that, Tyson, not a whole lot. No.
Right.
So do you? What about you?
I think my first thought of it would have been Boy George, actually. So like there was that time in the 80s where there was such mainstream acceptance of weirdos in a sense. And it wasn't like he was, to me at least, who I think I was probably 10 at the time, was out. I didn't really know why he looked the way he looked or why he was dressing the way he was dressing, except that he was eccentric. And at that time, I remember thinking, oh, well, that's interesting that boys can do this. So there was that. And then it wasn't until maybe Golden Girls, I think, it was because I used to watch that with my mom. To this day, it's one of my favorite sitcoms. And I remember there being episodes with queer characters on it, like Blanche's brother was queer, and there was Dorothy had a friend that came that was queer and fell in love with Rose.
Lesbian. But isn't that where one woman and another?
We already know what it means.
Jean has the hots for Rose. I don't believe it. I do not believe it.
I was pretty surprised myself.
Well, I'll bet. To think Jean would prefer Rose over me? That's ridiculous.
And it was those kind of things that happen to adults. But so those things made me go like, oh, there are these people in the world, and this is how you're supposed to react to them, or these are the perspectives, because the queer media was always trying to teach straight people something, basically, or tell them, at the best of times, a lesson about how queer people were just normal people. At the worst of times, it was like queer people are side characters and they just get killed off, or something like that happens to them. So there were those types of examples, but they were not, young boys getting in relationships that were healthy, like Heartstopper is nowadays, for example. So yeah, kind of limited.
I've never seen that. I've heard about it, but I've never watched it.
Oh, well, let me tell you, you better watch it. And when you do, you will probably be super jealous of the way kids potentially could be with each other nowadays, and how you didn't have this in high school. It's really a great representation. It's super great representation. It's not only gay boys. There's a wide cast of characters, but it wrecked me the first season when I watched it, because I was like, well, this isn't fair.
Yeah, well, I feel that one way that I feel that I was cheated as a teenager is that we didn't get to date.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say we. I have to speak only for myself. I didn't date anyone, and I think that was an important experience for my heterosexual friends who were who dated and could experiment and discover. I think there's a period of self-discovery and understanding who you are and what your body is like, and also emotional connections with another person. People like me of that generation, we didn't get that at all.
Yeah.
Kind of maybe fantasize, dating the high school quarterback or something, but these were you never actually did it. So
I had girlfriends.
A little bit cheated from that.
I did have girlfriends, and it was a way to mask everything, right? I mean, I thought
so you did have girlfriends.
Yeah, I did, but that was when I was quite young, and it was always such a challenge, as you can imagine, right? So it never worked out. Obviously, and once I was with men, I realized, oh, this is how it was supposed to be. But I had one best friend who was a boy from grade 9, and we hung out all the time, and we if you look back on it, it was bromancy in a way that now would be queer coded, but at the time it was just you didn't think about that, but I thought about it, and I thought about, touching him and fantasizing that this would be something in the future, and knowing it was just not a possibility whatsoever. So, certainly I felt cheated in that sense.
I wonder sometimes, I don't think I've ever thought about this before because I never dated. I went to a couple of high school dances, but those were not, I would not call that anything close to dating. I did not date girls. I've never kissed a girl. I never had sex with a girl.
Well, you're not missing much. Relax, everyone. It's just a joke. If you like sex with women, that's totally cool.
Well, it certainly wasn't something that I was interested in, but I think that maybe by the time I got to that age, I realized that I was not going to be pulling the wool over anyone's eyes and be like, who do you think you are fooling, asking so-and-so on a date. I think maybe I was resigned to it. Like my family was very, 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 very active in theater and local theatrics and amateur theater. My parents, my sister and I, all of us.
So gay.
And that draws a lot of queer people.
Yeah.
And so, I can remember people my parents' age or even older who were gentlemen who were not married and had maybe an air about them, and sort of everybody kind of knew why they weren't married or why they weren't dating someone. And I guess that even though I was much younger than these people, I felt I was sort of in the same category. The people just sort of gave me a free pass, and they weren't going to wonder, why don't you have any girlfriends? It certainly isn't something that my parents asked me about. I also think, frankly, just with all respect to the women I know, I was not the slightest bit interested in this.
Well, you saved them a lot of drama too, right? People like, it wasn't like I was a playboy or anything, but I certainly broke some hearts, and I thought it was very wrong of me to have done that. But I was doing it for my own self-preservation, like it was really, honestly, even though I probably wasn't pulling the wool over anybody but these girls' eyes, I thought I was doing a pretty decent job of covering it up. Let's jump ahead a little bit to adulthood. How has being queer in, I guess, France is where most of your adulthood has been. How has being queer impacted your life there in any way that you can recognize it doing so?
I don't know, maybe not a huge impact, but I realize, time goes by so quickly, and I've lived here for a long time now, but it doesn't really seem like a long time because I can remember the beginnings of my life here as though it were just a year or two ago. But it's a long time, and society has changed a lot, and France has changed a lot. And when I first came to France, the big revolution was civil partnerships were voted into it's not constitutional, but it became legal to enter into a civil union with someone of the same sex. Basically, about the time that I moved here, and I had a boyfriend at that time, and we entered into that civil partnership, and it seemed kind of major because at that time I had a job, but I knew that if I didn't have a job at some point, that partnership could potentially make it easier to stay legally in France.
Interesting.
And that seemed like it was so big and so major. I had no idea that on the horizon would be same-sex marriage. I don't know why I don't like that term. I can never figure, marriage between, I guess there's something wrong with that. I don't know why that.
I don't know. I just call it marriage.
Even at that point, I was already living in France and thinking, wow, we will never, this is the best thing we can get. And it's just great to be able to have this civil union. And it wasn't, it was kind of, it did not give you nearly the rights that you have when you marry someone. So, and of course, then France, before it was the case in the United States, France legalized same-sex marriage. And I was very proud at that moment, and also proud afterwards, a few years later, when it became legal in the United States. And I think I am not married, but I am happy now that at this stage of my life, I realize that it's now a decision. I like having that choice, and that if I'm not married, it's not because I can't get married, it's because I don't want to be married. So I think when I look at my time as an adult in France, I really saw moving from this civil partnership to the excitement then of thinking, oh my God, marriage, we can actually get married now, to realizing that I wasn't really the marrying type. And also now realizing that it's great because I can be a person who's not married, and it's not because like, oh, well, he can't get married. Those poor gays, they can pretend, they can have little ceremonies or whatever, but they can't actually get married. Well, now you can. So
Yeah, if that was the actual attitude, I think it was more like they shouldn't get married. Anyway, it was funny when Canada legalized it. We were quite early on. I remember my reaction was, oh shit. Like I actually didn't want, I wasn't thinking too long term really, but I was more like, I didn't want to be under the pressure that straight people were to get married and to like have the wedding ceremony and spend all the money. Like being gay was like a get out of jail free card to avoid all of this ceremony. At the time, that was my first reaction, and it's remarkably selfish actually, but I value the option, I guess, as you do now, as a mature fellow now. I don't think I thought so at the time. I thought, oh, Jesus, why do we have to do everything the way the straights do it?
I do kind of feel sometimes that our community has lost something now that we've become more mainstream. And there's something about being the strong links that I felt when we were still much more on the outside of society. There's something about that I I don't know if I go so far as to say that I miss it, because there was a lot of bad stuff going on at that time too, but there were connections with people. There were these sort of secret, not so secret clubs and meetings, and the camaraderie that you could feel with people because you felt that you were sharing an experience in society. You really were an outsider. You couldn't get married. That was the whole marriage thing that made me think of it. Now that I feel like sometimes that we've gained so much. Much more to be gained. We certainly have not, won.
Yeah, it's not done.
Not done by any means. But we also, I feel that there was that. Maybe I was just had become accustomed of being on the outside and being with other people who were on that outside and feeling like of a community. I don't know if I feel that same sense of community as I did when we were different.
Yeah, I can see what you mean.
I don't want to go back. I don't want to remove the rights that we now have that we did not have, but there was something about not having certain rights and not having the right to get married that created a sense of real solidarity between us that I don't think I don't feel it the same way anymore. But understand what I'm trying to say. I don't want to go back. I'm proud of the accomplishments. I realize that there's a lot more work to be done, but I don't know. Does that resonate with you at all, what I'm saying, or does that seem crazy?
Yeah, no. I mean, I lived through it too, so I get what you're saying. I think anybody who has a shared traumatic experience is bonded to each other in a way that if you don't have that experience, you're not going to experience it. That doesn't, I think, mean that we should lift up that traumatic experience as being a necessary thing that other people should continue to experience, right? I don't think that's what you're saying, but that, it is easy to look back at the past with a lens on that makes it seem, despite this bad situation, there was this good, and I missed that thing. And I think that's a normal human experience, but I think it's also worthwhile to recognize that the thing that bonded us together was the bad thing in the first.
Of course, absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely with that.
Yeah.
Good point. Point well taken.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah. Normally when we hit this part of the podcast, I like to ask if there's a particular queer joy story that comes to mind for you. Like, if I say the words queer joy, does that conjure up anxiety of trying to figure out something that is queer joy for you, or do you have a story that makes you think of when you hear the word queer joy?
No, it does not create anxiety. the opposite is the case. I think of several stories, and I have to choose only one. But
Well, you can pick more than one if you want to.
Pure joy. I can definitely think of a story, and it has to do with my childhood, and it has to do with my parents, and more specifically, my father. I told you that we were very involved in theater and it was encouraged by our parents. Our parents also were involved in theater, and there's just a kind of a family hobby that we had. And there was, in my town, there was a children's theater for people, between the ages of maybe 9 and 14 or something like that. And my parents encouraged us to get involved with that. And they did a play every year. And one year, the play was Hansel and Gretel. And it was the sort of thing where they had auditions, they put people into different casts depending on your geographical location. But basically, any kid who showed up for auditions got to be in the play. They didn't really reject anyone. You thought you were auditioning, but everyone got in. So you get in, but they didn't cast you as a particular character. In this case, in Hansel and Gretel, they just got 20 kids together, and there was the director who would get the kids together, and we'd have the script, and there'd be sort of a read through, and it was kind of a child's version of workshopping it. So who's going to play what part, who's going to be this, who's going to be that, etc. And at one point I was asked to read the part of the witch, not really to be the witch, but just because they needed someone to do the witch's voice. And I think I must have done a good job, because everyone was laughing and saying, do it again and everything. And it was getting close to the time when they needed to decide who was going to play Hansel, who was going to play Gretel, who was going to play the father, who was going to play the woodsman, who was going to play the witch, because the witch is a central character in that narrative, if you may remember. And after maybe the second or third, rehearsal or workshopping session, Mrs. Walschlager pulled me aside, and she said, Chad, I want to talk to you. I thought you did a really good job reading The Witch. Would you consider playing the witch? And I did not hesitate for a moment. I was like, absolutely, I will do it. I want to play the witch. And she said, well, that's something that I think you would do. I think you could bring some, an interesting angle to the role. And I said, great, I will do it. But she said, hold on, not too fast. I want you to go home and I want you to talk to your parents about it. I want you to ask your parents if it's okay for you to play the witch. And I said, yeah, whatever. But, do you think I should play her this way? Do you think I should play her? She's like, Chad, stop. You're getting ahead of yourself. You cannot play the witch unless you ask your parents. And sort of the penny dropped, and I realized, she thinks that maybe this is going to cause a problem, and that my parents won't let me play a typically female character. And so I thought, oh, fuck. Maybe she's right. Maybe I'm going to go home and my parents are going to say, no. You can play Hansel, you can play the woodsman, but you can't play the witch. So walking home from that rehearsal, I was thinking, how can I spin this? I really want to play the part of the witch. And the closer I got to home, the more I was convinced that Mrs. Walshley was correct and that I was not going to be able to play this because my parents weren't going to allow me to. So I got home and my parents were there, and I sort of mustered up the courage to say, I need to talk to you about something.
Well, that's a great way to start.
What's wrong? and we had rehearsal tonight and it went really well, but I was asked if I could play the witch, and Mrs. Walschlager said, you cannot play that role unless your parents say it's okay. And you know how parents, can just look at each other, they can communicate, they sort of exchange glances. They understand exactly what they're saying to each other without using any words. And, paused for a moment. My father said, I think you will bring great depth to that role. And I knew I was going to be able to get it. And for me, that was a great moment because I knew I was going to be able to dress up in a witch's costume, in a dress. I knew I had an ally because even though there was no, wink wink on my parents' side, I kind of felt that they were like, yeah, this is your moment to shine. You can get the dress and you can play the witch. And I think it was kind of a moment of hope. I was really proud to play that character, Tyson, and I think I was a great witch. I've never been really into
I am
drag.
sure that you were a wonderful witch.
I was a wonderful witch, and I got lots of applause, thunderous applause. Everyone knew I was a boy playing a witch, and that was many years ago. I was maybe 11 or 12 years old, and I thank all of the people who went out on a limb to say, listen, this boy was born to play the witch who eats the well, actually, she dies at the end. She's pushed into the oven, but my parents, were okay with it and said, especially my father, not that I preach my mother any less, but I don't think my mother would have cared. Mrs. Walschlager was afraid of my father. That's what she was afraid of. She was afraid that no son of mine is going to get into a black dress.
Well, that's not what happened at all.
So for me, that was a moment of queer joy. I felt that the world was kind of looking at me and saying, we can't really talk about this, but we know what this is about.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I'm Giovanni.
I'm Elizabeth.
My name is Tiago Mitoso.
My name is Ethan Trin.
Kanako Sula.
Most of my peers call me Ani.
David Monroe.
Gaye. I am 27 years old.
And I'm 57. Did I say that? I'm 57 years old.
I'm 32 years old.
I'm 48 now.
So I moved to Vancouver probably about 35 years ago. I grew up in Saskatchewan.
I'm half American and half Italian.
I am currently based in the city of São Paulo.
I'm a British woman.
I live in the north of France.
Growing up in my small town in Turkey.
And I'm an English teacher from Brazil.
I grew up in Vietnam.
In Chiang Mai, Thailand.
I would say pansexual and bigender.
A cis lesbian, although generally my preferred self-descriptor is queer.
I identify as a travesti.
I came out as bisexual, queer.
Bisexual, pansexual, and aromantic.
Well, queer, more and more.
I'm not particularly fond of the word man. I love the term queer.
Being queer.
Queer as F.
Hi, I'm Taylor Veigga.
And I'm Tyson Seburn, and you're listening to Workbook. Workbook is produced by me, Tyson, and is a community-driven queer ELT podcast and materials project. Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you next. Aside from Barbara, the ally.
Yeah, Barbara. Wow, I'll have to tell her that she came up. I'm not in close touch with her, but I still can contact.
Well, she'll be the feature of your promo now.
Like to know if she remembers, going down and meeting the gay boys in this year's parking lot.
Oh,